Their marriage seemed to be a model of an ideal relationship, copied from glossy magazines. Dmitri and Victoria, both successful, ambitious, firmly on their feet, seemed to have it all: a cozy home, career success, deep mutual understanding, which they demonstrated to others. Dmitri, despite his external restraint, had a character in which there was a deep-seated intolerance of weakness, any manifestations of dishonesty or betrayal. He valued control, order, absolute loyalty, and did not allow ambiguity in relationships. His anger, like a deep, dark pool, was hidden under the surface of calm, but was ready to spill out at the slightest violation of his ideal world. Victoria, with her fiery temperament, irrepressible ambition and thirst for thrills, was never a woman who would be satisfied with little. She was looking for new experiences, for a life full of events, for something that could wake her up, tear her out of a prosperous, but, as it seemed to her, insipid and boring rut. Her ambitions extended not only to the professional sphere, where she strove to conquer the heights, but also to her personal life, where she was looking for confirmation of her attractiveness, her power over men, that adrenaline that made her feel truly alive. Their relationship before the betrayal was, in fact, outwardly harmonious. There were no open conflicts, no obvious signs of a crisis that could alert Dmitri. Dmitri saw in their marriage a solid foundation, a symbol of his power and control, something that he had achieved thanks to his efforts. There was only Victoria's quiet, deep-seated dissatisfaction, her inner need for something more than what the stable, predictable, but, in her opinion, too correct Dmitri could give her. She felt that her potential was not realized, that her life could be brighter, more interesting, and this inner dissatisfaction, this itch for the unknown, became the breeding ground for her downfall. The betrayal was not an isolated incident, not a random mistake made on the spur of the moment. It was a conscious, repeated act that Victoria carefully concealed, enjoying her double life. For several months, succumbing to her desires, her ambitions, her inner protest against the correctness of life, she sought thrills by meeting different people. These were not colleagues with whom there would be professional risks, not family friends who could arouse immediate suspicion. Rather, they were strangers whom she found in places where Dmitri rarely went, in exclusive clubs, at random parties, on business trips where she went alone. People who could give her what she clearly lacked: passion, admiration, novelty, a sense of her own power and attractiveness. She was careful, calculating. Her motives were pure, not love, but a thirst for thrills and confirmation of her own value. But, as we know, nothing remains a secret forever, especially when life becomes so ambiguous. The fateful moment was a random, but incredibly fatal coincidence. Dmitri, as usual, returned home earlier than Victoria expected, with good news about his next professional triumph, which he wanted to share with his wife. He looked for her to share his joy, to see her shining face, but the house was empty. Suddenly, passing by their bedroom, the doors of which were usually slightly open, but today were tightly closed, he heard sounds that could not be interpreted otherwise: muffled voices, footsteps that did not belong to him, intimacy that was reserved only for him. Not believing his ears and his eyes, he carefully, like a predator, crept up to the door where his and Victoria's intimacy usually reigned, their personal space. He saw her. It was not a single violation, not a momentary weakness, but a scene that showed that this was not the first and most likely not the last such meeting. His gaze fell on details that could not be interpreted otherwise: unfamiliar clothes, alien things, intimacy that was reserved only for him and was now shared with someone else. In that moment, Dimitri's world, built on the ideals of harmony, loyalty, and absolute control, collapsed. A mixture of rage, pain, and deep contempt boiled up inside him. His inner anger, which he had so carefully suppressed for so long, burst out, but not in the form of screams, hysteria, or tears, but in the form of a cold, calculating, icy anger that penetrated to his very bones. He realized that his wife, his ideal Victoria, was not who she seemed. Her ambition, her thirst for novelty, her desire for thrills pushed her onto the path of betrayal, which for him was an absolute, unthinkable vice that he could not forgive. Dimitri, being a man with deep-seated anger, a passion for control, and an absolute intolerance for deception, could not simply forgive or forget. His goal was not just revenge, but something much more sophisticated, much more destructive, to avenge the insult, the betrayal, the blow to his pride, the destruction of his ideal world. He decided to use her ambition, her thirst for attention, and her propensity for risk against her. His revenge had to be cunning, psychological, aimed at making her feel the full depth of her fall, so that her ambition would turn into a real disaster for her, so that her desire for a bright life would lead to her complete destruction. For several weeks, Dimitri behaved as if nothing had happened. He was calm, even more affectionate with Victoria than usual, which only strengthened her confidence that he knew nothing, that he was still blissfully ignorant. She continued her secret meetings, feeling invulnerable, enjoying her double life, her ability to deceive, her illusion of control. She enjoyed her freedom, her sense of her own power, her ability to manipulate reality. Dimitri, on the contrary, observed, collected information, planned, built his destructive plan with the precision of a surgeon. His anger was like a cold fire that slowly but surely flared up, turning into a calculating, merciless plan. He started small, with subtle, imperceptible steps. Using his knowledge of her ambitions, her connections, her weaknesses, he began to subtly manipulate her environment. Through anonymous messages, staged accidents, disinformation that he skillfully spread, he began to create an atmosphere of doubt and mistrust around her, as if it were her own fault. He knew that Victoria valued her reputation very much, her image of a successful, self-confident, respected woman. He decided to undermine precisely this, to destroy the image of her that she had so carefully created. The first stage was the spread of rumors about her professional incompetence. Not direct accusations, but subtle hints that made people doubt her successes, her achievements. He threw information into her work environment that cast doubt on her ideas, her projects, her ability to lead. He skillfully highlighted her mistakes, her failures, making them more noticeable, more significant, as if they were the result of her irrepressible, but uncontrollable ambition. Victoria, ambitious and proud, felt the ground slipping from under her feet. She tried to fight, make excuses, look for someone to blame, but Dimitri, acting from the shadows, created circumstances that made her excuses unconvincing, her attempts futile, and she herself increasingly isolated. Then he moved on to the next, much more personal stage, her connections that were not related to work, her secret hobbies. He wasn't going to expose her betrayal directly, that would have been too easy, too straightforward. Instead, he decided to use her thirst for attention and her connections with other men against her. Dimitri began to carefully collect evidence of her connections, not only physical ones, but also her correspondence, her confessions of wanting more, her flirtations, her hidden passions. He did it with cold, mathematical precision, recording conversations, saving messages, documenting her every move, her every word, her every desire that could compromise her. When he had collected enough material, when all the pieces of the puzzle came together to form a single, terrifying picture, he chose the perfect moment. On her birthday, a day that should have been a celebration of her life, her successes, her ambitions, Dmitri decided to strike. It was not a public exposure with shouts and accusations, that would have been too crude. It was a much more sophisticated performance, calculated for a psychological effect, for the complete destruction of her personality. During the celebration, when everyone had gathered, her colleagues, influential people, friends, and, of course, the closest people who were supposed to share her joy, Dmitri, smiling, as if nothing had happened, took the microphone. He began to talk about his wife, about Victoria, about her ambitions, about her desire to succeed, about her desire to be the best in everything. He talked about how proud he was of her, how he admired her strength, her determination, her insatiable thirst for life. Then he moved on to a more intimate part, but without revealing the whole truth, without directly saying she cheated. Instead, he began to talk about how he appreciated her openness, her honesty, her ability to see the world without rose-colored glasses, her desire to live a full life. He mentioned her need for new experiences, her thirst for life, her irrepressible energy, which, in his words, sometimes overflowed, and which he, as a husband, tried to understand and accept. Then, as if by chance, as if sharing a personal moment, he took out his smartphone. "I want to share with you one thing I did for Victoria," he said, and there was a cloying, snake-like sweetness in his voice. "Victoria, you love surprises, you love when you are surprised, when life is full of surprises, right? I know how much you value our harmony, how much you love when everything goes according to plan, when everything is predictable. But I thought you might like something a little different. Something that will remind you how important it is to be alive, how important it is to feel, how important it is to take risks, how important it is to live life to the fullest." And then Dmitri showed a series of short videos and audio recordings on the large screen that was used for presentations. These were not direct evidence of her physical infidelity, not compromising scenes. These were much more subtle, but no less destructive materials. There were fragments of her correspondence with different men, full of ambiguous phrases, desires to meet, promises. There were short audio recordings of her voice, where she spoke about her dissatisfaction, her thirst for something more, about her secret meetings, about how she was looking for life outside their marriage. He showed not the fact of betrayal itself, but her motivation, her thoughts, her desires, which destroyed the image of the ideal wife that she created for the outside world. There was no explicit mention of names or specific situations, but everyone present, knowing Victoria, her character, her ambitions, her thirst for life, could easily put two and two together, understanding that behind the life and impressions there was something much darker. Dmitri did not blame her. He only presented visions of her life, her dreams, her needs, as if admiring her openness and courage, her independence. He talked about how much he valued her ability to enjoy life, her ability to have fun, her independence from him, from their marriage. He didn't say she cheated, he said she lives life to the fullest, and I want you to see it, so that you understand who she really is, how strong and brave she is." Victoria, watching this, felt not just shock, but horror. Her carefully constructed world, her ideal image, her reputation, her ambitions, everything she held so dear, was crumbling before their eyes. All eyes were riveted on her changed face, on her figure trying to maintain self-control, which now seemed insignificant. She felt how her dreams, her desires, her aspirations were turning into weapons directed against herself. Her thirst for thrills and new impressions turned into an absolute disaster for her, a humiliation that she could not even imagine. Dmitri, having finished his speech, only smiled coldly. He did not shout, did not accuse, did not cry. He simply showed everyone what he knows, and that he, being evil and calculating, is capable of such revenge that destroys a person from the inside, depriving him of everything he values. His goal was not to make her suffer physically, but to take revenge for his offense, for the blow to his pride, showing everyone that even a calm husband can be scary when his trust is betrayed, when his control is broken. He took revenge by destroying her world, her reputation, her self-esteem, using her own ambitions and her thirst for life as a weapon. After that evening, Victoria, having lost the respect of colleagues, friends and, of course, her husband, found herself in isolation, just as Dmitri once felt, lost in his ideal, but empty marriage. His revenge was cold, calculating and absolute, leaving behind only ashes and fragments of someone else's pride.